Hey, how's it going, everyone? Carlo here from All You Can Board. As always, I'm here with my cousin Dylan, and today we are counting down our top 10 games each that play best with two players. So this is kind of an updated video for 2023. Back in 2021, we did two separate videos. One was the top games that play best at two players that aren't specifically two-player games, and then we did a separate one for best two-player only games. Now what we're doing is basically combining these and saying all games that play at the two-player count are eligible, whether it's only two players or two till whatever.
It's like a fusion of those two views, like Dragon Ball Z, the
Wow.
Vegeta and Goku.
The first time in
together.
almost 3 years of this channel is the first time I think Dragon Ball Z has made it
Is
into
it?
a mint. Probably. How would it else would it have come up?
I mean, I should have done a solo. No, I'm sure there's probably a Marvel Champions video somewhere where I reference something from Dragon Ball.
Maybe
There must be.
Let's hope this is the first.
No,
we're breaking new ground.
we referenced it in the loop, didn't we? Because of that expansion thing.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
must
you're
have
right. You're
mentioned
right.
it.
You're
The
right. You're
Kaiju
right. The
balls
Dragon
or
Ball. Yeah,
whatever.
you're right. Okay, fair enough.
Second
Good.
time.
Well spotted. Well spotted. So yeah, this is an updated version. On the last time we did these videos, I think we each picked 5 games. This time we're each picking 10. We have not gone over our picks with each other whatsoever. As usual, we're probably gonna have at least like 2 or 3 overlaps or something like that. But before we kick it off, I want to ask you what makes an excellent two-player game for you, or are there different things, or do you look for something specific in a two-player game?
I don't know if there's anything specific I look for. Like in two player, I mean, in general, I guess at 2 players, unless I'm playing games with you, I don't always go for like something that's super meaty or lengthy. Like you and me we'll play a lot of those games, and we also play shorter ones and stuff too. But there are a lot of like concise 2-player games that I can like reliably get done in an hour that I tend to end up gravitating to more because 2 players is the count I just play board games at the most, and I don't often. There's tons of times where I play games with people that haven't played board games as much, or it's their first game in a while, or whatever. So to know we're going to get this done in 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something can be really valuable at 2 players. And usually they're really tight. If it's a good 2-player game that gets it done in like half an hour, it usually means it's a tight experience that I gravitate towards those. So those are some of them, but then there's also like the super long games that just happen to play good at 2 players as well.
Right.
I would say that I gravitate a little bit more to that side, but I'm open to pretty much anything with 2-player games.
Cool. Yeah, for me, I would say the main thing I look for is, and this isn't going to apply to every single game on my list, but most of them I would say have usually something where every decision I make or my opponent makes is going to affect the other person's options in the game state. So whether it's like we have a common discard pile that we share, or I put something there that blocks my opponent, some of that push and pull, that tug of war kind of feeling. But all right. Well, anyways, I think I'll kick it off to you to start us off with number 10.
All right. I had a bunch of games fighting for this number 10 spot. Like it was a really tough call to like eliminate a few. And just
At the end, we'll make a sad mention to the games that were in the 11 and 12
Not
kind of range
honorable
that got
mention.
in. Yeah,
Sad mention. So just squeaking on at number 10, holding on to a spot on this list is Stellar. So Stellar is not a super like well-known, well-talked about game. At least like I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about it. Here and there it pops up. I found this randomly in a local board game store one time, picked it up off the shelf. I really love Stellar. And I've only played it at 2 players. Is it a 2-player only game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So of course I've only played it at 2 players.
You're maybe mixing up with Sub-Astral.
Yeah, of course. So what I love about Stellar is it's not straightforward in the sense that like, oh, you just make a decision. The decision you're making is going to have this like other effect that that's going to happen from that decision you make. So you have this telescope and you have your journal or whatever it's called. And when you place a card into one, the card that you pick from this row of like 5 cards that's available is essentially going to determine which the other cards gets placed into the opposite thing. If I place a card in the journal, the other one's getting placed into the telescope. If I place one in the telescope, the other one's getting placed in the journal. And having to like decide that, sometimes you can be like, oh, of course I want that card, and because I want it to go there, but you have to think, but what is that going to cause to happen to my other area? And one area is going to like influence scoring in a different way depending on like how you've stacked up your journal, and the other one is going to be like how you've organized your telescope into different quadrants, and like which color planets, or not planets, there's planets and black holes and like all these different categories or whatever, how they're all lined up on your telescope. So it's a very thinky game. We've talked about this a lot. There's not much more I can say about that I haven't already gone over. The only downside to Stellar, and we've talked about this before, is just the table space it takes up. It takes up a lot more table space than a small card game in this kind of box you'd expect. But for the price of this game, for how much thinkiness is in it, in a good way in my opinion, and how much mileage you'll get out of it, it's just always been a favorite of mine to go back to, and it just holds on to a spot on this list.
Nice. Yeah, I think we each had this at number 3 when we did did our 2-player only games list a few years ago. I haven't played it, like, I don't think at all in the last 2 years, so it's not on my list anymore, but awesome game. Really good pick.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, my number 10 is a game that, for anyone who watched our recent top 50 games of all time, this was a new to me game that just squeaked in, I think at number like 47. So this is a fairly new game to me. This is Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. So this is a 2002 release from Reiner Knizia. Shout out to Jeff and Jamie from Foster the Meeple, who found out this was one of my Grail games and sent me a copy. Thank you so much once again. I've been loving this. So it's basically a 2-player only game, asymmetric, 1 player. So I'm gonna get this right this time. You're playing
get it wrong, please.
1 player is the Fellowship, and you're basically trying to get to the other end of the map. And the other side is like basically, here it is again, Sauron. So there's a Frodo and the gang, and Sauron and the gang, and his cronies or his goons or whatever. Yeah,
Frodo and the gang versus Sauron and his cronies. Tale as old as time.
That's the next one is gonna be Lord of the Rings : with that little subtitle. So. It's a really cool game. It's basically an updated version of Stratego, where you each set up pieces on your side of the map that all correspond to the different characters from Lord of the Rings. They each have a different level of strength and unique abilities and stuff like that. And yeah, the player who's playing as the Fellowship is just trying to get Frodo to the other side of the map, and the other player is either trying to kill Frodo or get 3 of their characters to the Shire. The first person to achieve one of those objectives wins. It's a game that I enjoyed quite a bit the first time I played, and after even the second or third play, I wasn't sure ultimately where it was going to land for me. And then I kind of played it in succession a bunch in the span of a couple weeks over the holidays, once with like my 9-year-old nephew, once with a couple other friends. I've shown this to about 5 people now, and it has gone over so well with everyone. And the last few plays I've had have just shown me another level of sort of depth and complexity to this game. Every time I play, there's something new being revealed, a different way that you can use a character, a different strategy that you can try. Really, really fun game. I'm so happy I have this in my collection. It's not easy to find, so if you see a copy somewhere for cheap, I highly recommend you pick it up, or at least give it a shot, especially if you like Lord of the Rings. Awesome 2-player game.
Yeah, I expected this to be on your list. I think once I played it more, there's a chance it could crack mine as well.
Right.
I only played it the one time, but I really liked it. Yeah. I just need to get into the nitty gritty and like the strategy a bit more to know how it ranks for me.
For sure. I think this is one of those 2-player games that you're not going to have your ideal experience of the first or even second time you play. It's going to take a few games to really, really love it.
We're going to the cabin next weekend. You should bring it because I will do a couple rounds of it.
Yeah, that's Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation.
Nice. Right before I jump into this pick, I realized we never really, just really quickly, the criteria we used a little bit to choose these games, because we do a lot of lists, and some people might be like, oh, I can just go to your like top 50 and be like, I can just like look at the 2-player games and rank them. We purposely didn't include games that if we think they played better at a different player count, like 3 or 4, then we didn't include them on this list, even though we're including like all games. We're specifically trying to like just make it a little more interesting and hone in on the 2-player aspect, as well as I kind of reposition different things based on, I feel like in our top 50 video and some of the other ones we do, there's other criteria and other things that kind of like determine where things rank, whether it's nostalgia, whether it's like personal experience, whatever. Whereas this, I kind of honed it on like, I'm just going to focus on how this plays at 2 and what that means to me, and then that might reposition some games slightly and make
and it's sort of like if I had the ideal, you think of some games you have your favorite person to play this game with because you've played it a lot, and I kind of thought of it as in the ideal circumstances, if I could play this game with my first choice person or whatever, where would I rank this compared to the other games as a 2-player game in the ideal circumstances kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, my number 9 is a newer game called Caesar.
Nice.
Caesar Roman 20 minutes. 10 minutes.
Easy now.
Maybe
it's a little longer than 10.
This is from Paolo More, who's quickly becoming one of my favorite designers. I think both of ours in some ways. So Caesar is a 1 to 2-player game, but just pretend it's just a 2-player game because you don't want to play the single-player mode, in my opinion. The 2-player game of this is amazing. I don't think either of us expected going in that it was going to land this way. Like, I'd heard things about it. I expected that on some level I would find it enjoyable, or there'd be things about it that I thought were novel or liked or whatever. I don't think I thought it was going to be a game that landed on my top 10 games that I played, or top 10 2-player games. The theme doesn't speak to me, like the war theme. It's not something I get into with board games or really in general. But the idea of all these different territories or provinces or whatever they call them on the board, and you have to essentially be placing these tokens that have 2 numbers on them, and one is going to face one territory, one's going to face the other, and that's going to determine your strength in the territory. the fact that you have to position these things and know that like I might be assigning 5 strength to this one, but that means I'm assigning 2 strength to the other one. What am I willing to give up? What am I trying to win? And then as you win these territories, if you win other ones next to it, it chains and you get to get rid of your tokens quicker, and whoever gets rid of all their tokens first wins. That it never stops being satisfying because there are so many avenues to victory. And like if all of a sudden you start, you know, chain a bunch of stuff together, even if I was trying to focus on something else, I almost have to stop you from chaining. Otherwise, unless I have a way to get, you know, do things faster than you, I have to block you. And at the same time, if depending on which powers we're collecting, you might have to be like, oh, I'm doing good on chaining this. But if Dylan gets another one of those, you know, whatever the little architecture tokens are, if he gets another one of those, he's gonna jump ahead of me. I have to stop him and I have to try to grab that. It's just push and pull. I think both times we've played this, I think, or 2 or 3 times we played, but I think all of them we've done best of 3.
Yeah,
like it just
me as well.
It plays so fast, and you can. It's like a really effective way to be like, just in case like there was any sort of like luck element to it or anything like that, you can kind of even it out with best of 3, kind of like Lord of the Rings computation. But yeah, I love this game. I think that this one is probably one that the more I play, it will have the best chance of almost any game on this list of climbing the list and becoming like a mainstay in the top 5 of my top 2-player games. I just really like it. I need to play it more. It was on my top 50. It's going to stay there for a while. Yeah, big surprise this year, and I love Caesar.
Yeah, really good game. This one was around, I think, number 13 or 14 when I did my list, so it missed out by a bit. But one thing I want to say real quick is I didn't think of this until you mentioned it, but this is in a way a race game. When you were saying like you're trying to race to get those things, like I've never really thought of it as a race game. I think it was like kind of a war game, tile laying sort of thing, but like it is kind of a race with multiple paths to victory. It's just you don't see the paths as a map on like. But anyways,
yeah, no, it's great.
Very good game. All right, number 9 on my list is one that, well, I won't say what I was going to say because that might spoil something, is called Lost Cities. This is a game we've spoken about on this channel numerous times, a game that I think we both love quite a bit. For anyone who might not know, it's a 2-player only card game by Reiner Knizia, so another second Reiner Knizia game on my list here. It's a bit of a thing, I guess it's not the last one, I'll say that right now. Yeah, it's basically a hand management game where you are, on your turn, you play a card and then draw a card. But you're basically playing cards out to these little expeditions. There's 5 rows of cards or columns of cards. And I'm not going to get too into the rules. Most people have probably heard of this or know somewhat how it plays. And if not, go look it up online. But what I love about this game is there's a couple things. One is the shared board in the middle that is kind of your discard piles. And the fact that when you discard a card, you know, you're limited to what you can hold in your hand. Obviously, I think it's 8 cards in Lost Cities, or maybe it's 7. I think it's 8. And when you discard something, the next player can actually pick that up from their discard pile and use that on their turn. But one person's garbage, like you almost know that if you can't use it, chances are that the other player is almost definitely like waiting on it and needs that card. Yeah. So you're thinking, how much of my hand do I want to use taking up? Like how many of these spaces do I want to use holding cards that I'm just denying another opponent for, or waiting out until they play these cards so that now I can discard this card because now the card is useless to them and they won't want it anymore. There's risks that you're taking short and long term. The fact that the game plays over 3 rounds has this interesting dynamic where when the second and third rounds start, you already know what the score is. So depending if it's, you know, a close game or you're really far ahead or behind, you play differently and adjust your sort of level of risk and your approach based on the state of the game. So lots to love about this game. It's very simple. It's just like colors and numbers on cards. There's no like player powers. There's no fancy scoring conditions or whatever. Very simple. One I've played probably upwards of 100 times now. It's online on Board Game Arena if you want to try it for free. Yeah, Lost Cities. Really good, simple card game.
Nice. I'll have more to say about this later.
I figured. And that's what I was going to say at the beginning. That's what I was going to say. I was like, a game that you will say more about later. But
number 8 on my list, another new game, actually, is Radlands. So Radlands, I've talked about a lot. It is a fantastic 2-player only game, and it's one that I constantly am like trying to introduce to more people because I want someone to love it as much as me, so that it becomes like in the same way that we would gravitate towards like Magic the Gathering games whenever we got together. Someone that every time I like get together with, it's like we're both at equal skill level. Like let's throw down Radlands. We know the meta and kind of like get into that. Push and pull. It's just a 2-player battling game with lanes. You have 3 lanes. Each of them has your own camp. That is essentially what you're trying to do is destroy all 3 of the other person's camps. You're blocking those camps with characters that your opponent pulling from the deck, but we're both drawing from the same deck. So as I get cards, that's less cards you can get, less specific, legendary cards, or those like, higher cost cards, more powerful cards are going to get removed as people, pick them up from the deck. And the best part of Radlands, and I think we both agree on this, is that at the start of the game, the camps, you get 6 camps to look at. You're going to choose 3 that are going to be your camps that game that are you're protecting. Each of them have unique abilities that can drastically change how you're going to approach that game, what your combos and strategies are going to be, but it also determines how many cards you're going to start with. And as we've seen many times we've played, that can be a huge swing. Like the last time we played this, which was just a few weeks ago, I think that was the most cards you've ever started with.
Yeah, I had that one that lets you start with 3 or 4, which is I think the only camp that lets. I think I started with 6 or 7 cards, and you had I think 3.
It was wild, and
because you can junk cards. I think I junked like 5 cards on the first turn to get so much stuff and trying to get ahead, right?
And I couldn't. I had a bit of a moment where like Radlands has these swings, and I swung it maybe just ever so slightly, but never enough to like threaten you. And I think that's where we saw like there was a huge advantage of starting with like those extra cards, right? And so having to weigh that as you start the game and not knowing what your opponent's going to choose either to like be able to play off that is awesome. And it's always you're never out of it. Like I even when you were taking the lead in that game, I just felt like
you hung on for so long. I kept thinking I was gonna win earlier, and you just kept finding ways to hang on.
And there's different combos you can find. It just I have fun every time I play Radlands. I've never had a game where I've left and gone or like, oh, that was a bad game. Like, yeah, sure, some games better than others, but even my worst game of Radlands has been a really fun experience, and that just says a lot to me for a 2-player game, especially a new one that's competing with all these other ones on the list. So it's a game I'm going to constantly go back to. I know that I think they've said that like they don't have plans to like add more to Radlands. I don't even know exactly what I would want to them to add. I just know that like I just know that there's going to be a day where maybe I'm tired of Radlands because I've played so much of it, and at that point I would just love to be able to like move on to more of this type of system, because I love the system. I just love that we're pulling from the same deck. We have these lanes. We have these amazing unique abilities that you're deciding at the beginning. I just want more of that. Yeah. I want to be able to.
I think they'd be more likely to make like a Radlands 2 type of thing rather than an expansion. I don't think they'll ever make an expansion because they've made the box a certain way that can't fit more cards and all this stuff, and they've said they don't want to expand that game. But
if they make a sequel, I'll be all over it. That's for sure.
Cool. Yeah. I would guess right now, without seeing the rest of our list, this is probably the nicest looking game, like production artwork wise, probably the nicest one on our collective top 10s.
I would agree.
We'll see, I guess.
Yeah. That is Radlands number 8.
Nice. All right. My number 8, I don't have a box to show you on screen here because it's not one game. Well, I guess it is a game, but like, anyways, I'll just say it's Keyforge. So this is a 2-player. Well, I guess technically there is a solo mode. There's these solo adventures you can play, but it's a primarily 2-player card game. I guess I could have brought one of my many deck boxes to put on screen, but it would have just been a tiny little thing here.
Card.
Yeah, exactly, or a single card. But sort of, if anyone's familiar with games like Magic the Gathering, it's that kind of idea in the sense that you can buy, well, you don't buy individual cards, but you buy decks, and it's a kind of a battling game. The game plays very differently though, and it's a unique deck system. It's the world's first unique deck game where you basically buy a deck, you don't know what's going to be in there, you know what set it comes from, what kind of cards might possibly be in there, but the game has 7 different like houses or factions, at least in the base set. There's been a lot more added to it since then, but basically you get a deck of 36 cards. There's going to be 3 of those houses in there, 12 cards from each of the 3. And you basically are playing through. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the rules because there's a lot to take in, but it's a very, very interesting game. The kind of like story and theme of the world is very kind of out there and very silly. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and I kind of like that. It makes for these interesting, quirky characters and artwork and flavor text on the cards. Like it's not like a serious, darker game like Magic, right? It's definitely more on the kind of silly side. But it went through a bit of a lull. It was kind of on hiatus where the game was switching, like they lost, there were some issues with the algorithm that they used to make the decks. Then they said they were bringing the game back. Then it shifted over from Fantasy Flight Games to a different company, Ghost Galaxy. So the game's in this weird middling state, and it was hard for me to place it on this top 10 list because I haven't played a lot of it over the last couple of years, but I'm also excited. Like I've pre-ordered the decks from the new set that are coming shortly. I'm expecting to get way more into this year, and this is one that I could see going way higher up on my list long term. It's a game I absolutely love. I just haven't played as much over the last couple of years, but yeah, I'm really eager to get Keyforge back to the table a lot this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to play more of it. I think it'll have a chance to get onto these type of lists for me once I reinvigorate my experience with it, because it's a great game. haven't even really thought too much about Keyforge in a long time. So.
Yeah, which is understandable. You were really into Marvel Champions
Yeah.
right around the time when Keyforge started to kind of like fizzle out a little bit during the pandemic and all that. So yeah, that was my number 8, Keyforge.
Nice. My number 7, I also don't have this. I think the only one I don't have here because you own this this game and I don't, and that is Res Arcana. So this has quickly become one of my favorite games in general, and it just so happens that 2 players is my favorite way to play it, and that's mostly because I actually really do like playing it at 3 and 4. I have often played it on BGA that way and really enjoyed it. I just find that the only thing I don't like about Res Arcana is the downtime between turns, because you're making one decision on your turn. Like I can already know the next 4 things I want to do, and those 4 things might not be influenced by what other people do unless something like drastic happens.
Yeah, because the other way your engine runs.
I almost just want to be like, I'm going to do this, and I have to wait for other people to do it. If it's just 2 players, someone does their turn, it comes back to me, it feels like it's moving at the right pace. So I've just always preferred to play it at 2 for that reason. But this is just an amazing game. Like you're trying to hit such a low point total to win, but you're trying to create an engine to get there more efficiently and faster than your opponents or your opponent in a 2-player game. And you're having to either draft cards at the beginning to craft the best deck to do that you can, or you're having to just take the randomness that you've received and say, how do I turn this into something that's effective? Both ways are super fun. I don't even think, I've said this before, I don't think I have a preference. I'll play it either way, alternating. It's just an amazing experience where I always find some sort of combo that is so satisfying to do. And even when I lose, it's usually because my opponent has come up with some combo that ends up impressing me, or they've stolen those places of power or whatever it is before I can get them and stuff.
Even the items are crucial too.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just, great game. If you haven't played it, check it out on BGA and play it a couple times because I hated Res Arcana the first time I played it, and now it's one of my favorite games of all time. So
yeah, those Tom Lehman games tend to have that effect on me as well. Just the kind of like not sure at first, but then they tend to grow the more you play them. But happy to see you on your list.
Yeah.
That was number 7, right? Yep. Okay, number 7 on my list is a game that was, well, for anyone who watched the channel, this was my 2021 game of the year. That is Great Plains. So this is a 2-player only game that plays in about 20 minutes. Because the games got released in the same year and they have the same playtime and player count, the box size, we've compared this to Caesar quite a bit because they both say 20 minutes. We say every time that we bust the game out, we play a best of 3. It's got that similar kind of feel to it. But basically, the idea of the game is it's a variable map setup with these hexagonal cardboard tokens or whatever, boards. You piece them together, you make this map, and then you are basically going back and forth. Every player is going to get 20 turns, placing these little tokens on the map. At the start of the game, each player is going to place 3 of these little cave tokens across the map. They're kind of spread out throughout the map as points where you'll originate from. And then once you've set up your 3 initial caves each, you're going to go back and forth. And again, you're each going to get 20 turns. You just place one of your pieces. You're either playing as the snakes or the foxes. You place a piece on the map either adjacent to one of your caves or adjacent to a previous other animal token of yours. You're basically spreading out, trying to make your way to these meadows that are spread out. And again, depending because the way the map configuration works and the random setup, the number of meadows there are and the size of these meadows, which thereby determines the point values of them, is going to be different every game. So you're trying to figure out which meadows do I want to try to make a play for, and you're trying to get area majority in them. Whoever has the most pieces in each meadow scores the full points. That's pretty much all the game has. There's some little ability powers that you can pick up from these animals. Simple game that does a lot, it has a high level of depth with low level complexity of the rules. Very easy to learn and get into very quickly. Plays so fast. Just a game I'm nowhere near getting tired of after probably 10 to 15 plays in less than a year. Really, really liking this game. Highly recommend everyone at least check it out because it's very quick and very easy to play.
Yeah, I can't wait to play more of this. I've played far too little for how much you talk about it.
Right.
Do you think Great Plains is a app name, or would you call it Wonderful Plains?
Excellent Plains, even.
Fantastic Plains.
Well, but great sometimes is also grand, big, you know what I mean? So, but
we're gonna go with Fantastic Plains.
Fantastic Plains. It's gotta be something with the P for the alliteration. Perfect Plains.
Perfect Plains. Wow,
Plentiful
it's
Plains?
A perfect game.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's a perfect game.
Okay, fair enough. A little extreme, but
yeah, good pick.
Great Plains. Go check it out if you haven't yet.
All right, number 6 for me, a game that I've talked about lots and might be one of my most played games in my collection. That is Patchwork. Patchwork, I feel like I fell in love with all over again this year. I've liked Patchwork for a long time, but how much I played it this year, and then specifically on BGA as well, in addition to, this is one of my most played physical copy games last year. But on BGA, because the tournament we had, the AYCB tournament that was run, and as well as just like random games I played.
Come join our Discord if you want to get on tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks to Ted for all the work he does putting those tournaments together.
Absolutely.
I just fell in love with Patrick all over again. Like I said, it took on another meaning for me. I was playing more aggressively. I was playing more competitively, and I also played many games really relaxed. And it reminded me how much range Patrick has. That's what I love so much about it. Is I can introduce Patrick to someone for the first time, and I can have this relaxing experience where I end up losing, even though I've played so much Patrick and they've played it for the first time. And sometimes with negative points, I lose. Or then I can play it uber competitively where I'm looking like 5 turns ahead being like, okay, like what do I take so that they can get this piece they need? And I'm being really competitive about it. And I just love that range with it. It's a very, very solid and tight Uwe Rosenberg design, one of my favorite games of his. And I'll just come back to this constantly. If you haven't checked out Patrick by now, there are so many different versions of it out there that are just changing like the artwork like for Christmas or for Halloween and all this stuff. I would highly recommend checking it out because I think that everyone who enjoys 2-player board games, especially with a more relaxed theme, is going to find something to love about this game.
Yeah, awesome game. I just want to ask you, do you prefer playing patchwork or doing actual quilting?
Actual quilting for sure, but it's I can't even keep it
I know. I was having trouble too.
I've never quilted, but patchwork is the closest I've ever come to wanting to quilt is playing patchwork. It's patchwork number 6.
Very nice. All right. My number 6 is a game I don't have the physical copy of here. I don't actually own it at all. I've played most of this on Board Game Arena, but I know someone who also has the physical version, so I have played it. That is Innovation. So this is a game that plays 2 to 4 players. I would probably never want to play it with 4. I'm open to trying it with 3, or I might have actually tried it with 3 on Board Game Arena, but this is a game that like by far is best with 2 in my opinion. It's one of the most, how would I say this? Like one of the most like volatile games that I'm talking about here, in the sense of like the way the game state changes and the way things can go in the middle of the game, and you feel like you're in control, and then suddenly something happens and you feel like the game has been completely flipped and now you're behind, you've got your back against the wall. It's basically a tableau building game with cards where it's a sort of a civilization themed, where you start in era 1 and you're basically moving your way through the ages sort of into the future. You're acquiring, like the cards have different like technologies and sort of advancements related to humanity and that kind of thing. So you're playing these more advanced cards. As you move up the ages, there's different icons that appear, and basically you're activating abilities on cards based on having more icons of that ability, of that type, than your opponent. So I might have 7 of this icon showing and my opponent has 5, so I can activate this card. I get the ability, they don't. But if I activate a card and I have, let's say, fewer than my opponent, they get to activate the ability and I do, but they go first. But I think I get a benefit and draw a card because they activated my ability on my cards. So there's abilities that you can activate to specifically force people to do something that they maybe didn't want to do. Or there's abilities that you want to trigger, but you need to have the majority of these icons. You're returning cards to piles. You can tuck cards. There's like different ways to score. There's multi-use cards. It's such an intricate game. The rules are very simple. But more than I would say most games on this list, the learning curve is steep, and in terms of also the level of appreciation, it takes a lot of games to really start learning the ins and outs and really appreciating it. Like, I've probably played upwards of 30 times now, and like I feel like only 5 or 10 games ago I've really started to hit my stride in terms of understanding really what I'm doing from like a strategy standpoint. Yeah. Such a rich, rewarding game. Can't wait to play a lot more of it. It could shoot higher up the list. The only reason I think it isn't higher so far is because a lot of it has been online, and the fact that the artwork and the look of the game is a bit tough to get too into sometimes. It's just very sort of drab looking. Yeah. But anyways, incredible game.
Yeah, I've only played this once. Like I need to play it more, but I feel like I've almost like the problem with games like this and games like with like Root and stuff like that is you fall behind from other people in your friends group, board game group playing it. And like now, if we went to go play it, it would be tough maybe for me to have as good of an experience, because if you play 30 times and now you've hit your stride and I'm like, what is this game? I almost have to go into BGA and just play a bunch, trying to like get a handle.
Play someone else first, right? And I'll stop playing for a bit and then we'll play.
Yeah, but either way, I do want to play more of this and just like see what the fuss is about, or if it's just not for me or whatever, because after one play I just couldn't make a good decision.
I don't know if it's a game you're gonna love, but I think if you were to play it a few more times, you would like speak really highly of it, even if it's not a game
you and Braden like it a lot, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Braden, by the way, who like we've had as soon as the game ends, we just rematch again. We've had an ongoing game of innovation for like 6 months now.
Awesome.
It's just awesome, constantly playing. Yeah, that's innovation. My number 6 two-player game of all time.
Nice. Number 5 is a game that I only recently, it only recently became a game that I preferred at 2. I used to prefer this at higher player counts, and I now prefer it at 2 the most, and that is Azul.
Oh, I didn't know you used to prefer it with more than 2.
Yeah, I think because I never got into, this was almost like the same kind of thing as Patchwork, because I never really got into like the competitiveness and the meanness of it and like the meta of it, or whatever you want to call it, as much. And so with 3 or 4, I just felt there was more tiles available, there was more opportunities, like there was more things that would change as it went around, so I found them more interesting. Right. Having played it now at 2 on BGA specifically, I mean, I played this tons physical, but it was the BGA game. I had one game that I played. I wish I had like recorded the game or I had the person's name, because they taught me a good lesson, and that's that Azul is can be one of the meanest games, because they just trashed me, and not just trashed me like making good plays. They also just like stifled me at every single step. Everything I wanted, they were looking at my board clearly and like making sure I couldn't do it, and it felt awful. But it also reminded me like, wow, okay, so I can play Azul this way, and let's see how that goes. So I started playing 2-player games of Azul more often, and I love it. I love having to not only manage my space of where I'm sliding these tiles and how effectively I'm building these chains to maximize my points, but also what is my opponent doing, and how can I still accomplish what I want to do, but also stop them? And when does it make sense for me to say, I don't even necessarily want these tiles, but if they get them, they're going to get this huge chain finish or whatever, so I'm going to block them and leave them with something that's going to get them a bunch of negatives on their floor, right? So that's what has made Azul become a game I prefer at 2 now. I'll still play at 3 and 4. I think it's still a great game at 3 and 4, but 2 is just now for me where this game shines, and kind of why the original Azul stands out from the other ones for me, is that as a 2-player game, this just has a classic feel in the same way the other games on this list do for me, and it's become a classic game for me now. Like I'll never turn down a 2-player game of Azul. I wish I should do what you're doing with innovation, just always have a 2-player game going with people, because I love it that much. It's one I could just keep coming back to.
Yeah. Awesome game. Didn't make my top 10 for 2-player games, but I also prefer it as a 2-player game, and really good. We'll never get tired of Azul.
That's Azul number 5.
Nice. Okay, number 5 on my list. So you know what? Even now I'm kind of waffling on the order of these next 2 so much. All right, you know what? Let's go with the gut instinct here.
Go with the gut.
Number 5 is Santorini. So this is a game that technically plays 2 to 4, but more than almost any game on my list, I would say this is a game that I don't think I'm never going to be the one to suggest to play this with 3 or 4 ever. I have a couple times with 3. It's okay.
I was going to say, I will say that I've had some games with 3 that were really good. And it's usually because one person stops another person, and it becomes this thing. But there's also been games where I'm like, I don't want to play this with 3 again.
That's the thing is, sometimes with 3, it ends up taking way too long, because it's just the triangle of you stop one person from winning, then they stop the next person, and whatever. But you're basically every player has 2 characters on this little map. It's, I think, a 5x5 square grid, or I always forget, 6x6 or something like that. It's pretty small. 5x5, yeah. And you each have 2 little characters on the map, and on your turn you're going to move one of the characters in one of the 8 directions around it, and then after you move that character, you're going to build a little piece of this tower, either a level 1, level 2, or level 3, or there's these domes that you can put on top of the towers as well, in one of the surrounding spaces, and then the other player is going to go. You're basically just taking turns doing that back and forth until one player wins by jumping from a level 2 onto a level 3 tower. So as soon as you get to the top of a tower, you win the game immediately. When I mentioned that you can put a dome, it's so that you cap the tower, and now someone can't to jump up there, and you can only jump up one sort of level at a time. So that's the basic idea of the game. This game previously came out, I don't remember what year it was quite a while ago, as just a plain little abstract game. It was just a white and black box with white and black pieces, no theme really, and they kind of Roxy spruced this up with this theme. They actually put it sort of set in the actual place of Santorini in Greece. And they've introduced the most interesting part of the game, which is the god powers. So obviously it leads to some imbalances. Sometimes the matchup isn't going to be equal, but the game isn't, that's not the fun of the game for me. Like these rounds take sometimes 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Sometimes they can be longer, maybe 15, 20 minutes, but generally it's pretty quick. And we play this similar to what we said about like Great Plains and Caesar. We often play this not only best of 3, like sometimes best of 5, best of 7, like this sometimes sits on the shelf for months at a time, but every time we play, we absolutely love it. There's nothing quite like it out there, and I think these days, let me look real quick. Yeah, these days I'd say in terms of two-player abstract games, like stuff in that realm of like chess and Summoner Wars and whatever, this still remains my favorite two-player abstract game, and I don't. It's going to take a lot for a game to replace it.
Yeah, it's a like a mainstay cabin game for us, and I think we always bring a copy to the cabin because lo and behold, at some point in the night, we'll just be like, let's just do a best of 3, best of 5 of Santorini. And we know it's going to be great. So
yeah, reliable, and everyone I show it to loves it. And I'll say right now, like Dylan has the expansion, which is the Golden Fleece, I believe, and like it's awesome. If you really like the game, it's a really good expansion. I've only had the base game since I've owned it. What is 5-6 years now? Yeah. And like even just the base game has so much content, so much variety in these god powers. Yeah, it's a no-brainer to get the expansion if you love it, but the base game is also more than good enough. So that is Santorini, number 5 for me.
Nice. Number 4 for me, a game you've already talked about, and that is Lost Cities. This is my copy. So yeah, I won't say much more about this other than to say this is just to me like the formula for hand management in this game has yet to be beaten by another game. Like, and I should say Lost Cities, Enchanted Plumes, Arboretum, like they all kind of have the same hand management system. It's become such a classic and staple that if some other game comes along that finds a better way a more simple way to somehow do that than other games want to replicate, maybe that's something that changes the landscape. But I just don't know that you can really innovate or get better on it. Like it's such a simple addictive thing to be like, I don't want to get rid of anything in my hand, but I have to. And I'm not considering just what I want to play. I'm also considering what is going to be beneficial to my opponent. If I get I don't want this card, but if I give it to them and they get 9 points off it, that could lose me the game. So now I'm holding a card that is nothing for me and valuable to my opponent. How long do I do that before I say, I have to give this up, or until it becomes clear, oh, now they don't need it, and I get rid. That whole system of hand management is so satisfying. Any game that has had a hand management in it, the Lost Cities version of that formula has just not been beaten for me, and so that's why it remains on this list. It's a game that I haven't played as much in the last few months, but I will go through spurts where I just play tons on BGA.
I was gonna say, we played so much of this in a span of a year or two.
It's great, and it's so funny because when I got this game, I knew nothing about it. It was a random game that I got. I think you saw it on my shelf one day and you either didn't know much about it or you had heard about it too. And we played a game of it. And then suddenly it's like, after playing it a couple times and not really understanding the meta and the hand management, like how intricate it could get, I think you and me had a game of it at the cabin years ago that I was like, oh my God,
Something
wait
clicked.
a second. Like, I don't want to get rid of this card. I want and suddenly it clicks. And then it was the BGA tournaments and stuff or seasons that started to really, help me appreciate it even more. Now, I love it. It's a fantastic game. Can't say enough good things about it. If you haven't played it, you should check it out.
Yeah, and this is one of those games where from both players at the table, at least probably 5 or 10 times per game, you're going to hear like, oh, or oh my God, or what are you doing, or I needed that card, or like I was waiting for that. Like there's always some people who just upset or disappointed by the state of how things are going, but love it.
Lost Cities, number 4.
All right, on to my number 4, which again I almost had at number 5, swapped around with Santorini. That is a game that Dylan already spoke about, Res Arcana. This one was very tough to place on the list because
you didn't give me the box when I had it out.
Nope.
You made me sit here with an empty.
Yep.
Wow. Just so I have to edit that in, hey?
I didn't want to spoil the pick if I didn't have to. Res Arcana is a game I absolutely love. The base game I think was just 2 to 4 players, right? And then the first expansion, Lux at Tenebrae, bumped it up to 5. I haven't played with the second expansion yet, but I do have it now.
Oh, you better bring that thing to the cabin.
Oh, absolutely. It's already packed and ready to go. So yeah, Res Arcana is, like Dylan's, I don't have a lot more to say about it because Dylan covered it very well. What I will say is the surprising reason of why it sneaks into this list of top 10 two-player games for me is that it's probably the least interactive game of my top 10. But because of how much better it is, like the player count thing is the main thing I want to focus about here. What I'm talking about is, considering it goes up to 5 with this expansion now, it's a game I don't think I will ever want to play with more than 3 players. I think I played it once with 4, and it felt way too long. The downtime, for this type of game, you don't want this thing to go anywhere near an hour, over an hour. Because a lot of the time in this game, by the 3rd round or halfway in, 3/4 in, a lot of the time, if you have a shot at winning or if you're already out, you're too far behind. So you don't want that to keep dragging on. And like you said, a lot of the time you know what you're going to do on your turn. So you want it to be quick and snappy. So that 2-player count is where it really shines. I played it once recently again with 3 players. And even with 3 players, it really dragged a lot more than I would have liked. So the player count aspect is huge in this. I do prefer the draft more than not drafting, but I think the game is awesome either way. There's just so much to like, and even though it doesn't have a lot of interaction, it's what it does with the cards and that aspect of trying to build your deck is such an enjoyable thing to do. It kind of just reminds me of that feeling we would get with like when we used to play Magic when we were like teenagers and stuff, and it's not the same. You're not constructing a deck quite in the same way, but it's that kind of more heads down, I've got my puzzle, I got to figure out what I'm doing kind of thing, but I do also have to be aware of my opponent. You're not attacking your opponent necessarily in the same way as Magic, but anyways, I don't know if I'll ever get tired of this game. If there's more expansions, I'll probably just keep adding them just because exploring these different card combos is what makes me want to keep coming back to this game. And not just the cards, but the other places of power, the items, everything. Awesome game.
It's a crime. It's a crime I don't own my own copy of this. I will just say that. I keep saying I need to get it. I need to just.
Here's the thing, though. But if I didn't own it and it wasn't on BGA, or even just one of those things wasn't true, you probably would have bought it by now.
Yeah,
but you're like, oh, I'll just call Carlo. Oh, I'll just go online. It's like, why are you going to buy it if you have easy ways to? Yeah.
I know, it's true.
But it's still worth owning physical. No doubt.
Yeah. Number 3 for me.
Into the top 3 here.
A game that you talked about already, and that is Santorini. Yeah, I love this game. It's so good. I don't tire of it. Every single time I play, I have at least one new combination of gods, or either I've never played that god, or I've never played that god against someone, or I've only played against this god. So I'm still discovering so much about this game every time I play. And not only does it come down to like, have you used these god powers before? It's just who you're playing against, how they move their characters. Like every game feels fresh and unique, and I can't say that about a lot of like board games. I can love a board game, but I can also admit that like it's not super unique or different every time I play it. You know, like Feast for Odin like has things that are different depending on what spots people go to, but I've played every strategy that if I'm going down one route on a certain strategy, I'm like, okay, this is familiar territory. With Santorini, I find that it's just one of those games where even if I've played a god power, there's something about it that I'm like, ooh, I don't know what to do in this situation because I've never encountered this specific thing, or they've never trapped one of my guys this way. So I love Santorini. This is, like you said, my favorite abstract game, I'm pretty sure, and it's probably going to stay that way for a long time. It's just an easy go-to game off my shelf that I keep trying to introduce to more people, so that again, anytime I have like, you know, I'm in a situation where I want to play a two-player game, and I want that kind of like chess-like feel, that I can just say, especially if they already know the rules, like let's just play a best of 3 of Santorini, and then if we want to play more, let's do a best of 5.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Amazing game. I love this so much.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think one thing I forgot to mention, I can't remember if you did, that I really like about the god powers too, is how there's powers that have actual abilities that you use throughout the game, but there's also powers that just change your win condition or give you a second win condition,
amazing.
But you don't actually get a different ability. Like one of them is, whatever, I won't get into it, but I just love that because sometimes you don't actually have anything different you can do, you just have a second way to win that the other person has to stop you from doing. So,
and I should mention, because one of my criticisms in my things I don't like in my top 10 games, someone mentioned in the comments that I'm pretty sure there's either an app or something, or a site or something you can go to that will assist you with making sure you don't have god combinations that are like less fun. It'll like
it's either on the card itself or it's in the rule book. I think it's in the rule book. It says don't play with this one.
There's that too, but I could have sworn that someone said there's also another system where it's like it recommends like if you're playing with this, like pair it with this or something.
Oh, okay.
I could have sworn there was a comment like that.
Of guide online or something.
Yeah, but regardless, there is a way to overcome and circumvent issues like that. But yeah, great game. Love it. And the artwork's great. It's really so inviting, and the table presence is amazing.
Yeah, everything the little platform where it's on an island above the water. Like
it's got so many things going for it.
Yeah. All right, my number 3 game is a game that was in my top 10 of all time. The last 2 years we did our top 10s. This still stands as this has been my number 1 2-player only game for quite some time. That is Battle Line. So, you know, obviously I have this ahead of Lost Cities. It is superior. I won't hear anything else about it. No, I'm just kidding. Opinions are subjective. I'm not going to give them that hard of a time. No, Battle Line is an incredible, incredible game. I know a lot of people dismiss it either because of the artwork or the box just looking kind of this old, or like maybe the war theme or whatever. Obviously a game like Lost Cities is more inviting, or even its kind of counterpart Schottentotten, which came out a year later. But this is basically a lane battling game where you're fighting over these 9 simultaneous battles happening, and the gist of the game is that you're basically going to be playing 3-card poker-style hands in an attempt to defeat the other player's formation of up to 3 cards for each of the flags. So to win the game, you either need to win 3 adjacent battles, like 3 adjacent flags, or any 5 flags on the map out of the 9. So you have them in a row, and basically on your card, you are similar to some of the other games we've talked about, like Lost Cities and stuff. You play a card, then draw a card. But you either have your regular battle cards, which just have numbers and colors on them, or you have tactics cards, which give you little abilities that you can use throughout the game. There's a limit on how many of these tactics cards you can use. They're usually either just to get an advantage, to get ahead, or to try and get back into the game if you're falling behind. But it's such a dead simple game. There's like not a whole lot in terms of like the rules can be explained in just a couple minutes. I've played this probably upwards of like 30, 40 times now. It's been a go-to 2-player game with various people who I game with over the past few years. Everyone I've shown this to has loved it. And even though in many ways you kind of like you see all the cards pretty quickly within a couple games, but even though you feel like you've seen all there is to see, the games still feel different, and it has this addictive feel every time I come back to it. I've never had a game where it's an absolute blowout. They're always somewhat close, but it doesn't feel like the game's automatically going to be close. You do still have to earn it by making good plays. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. But if you've overlooked Battle Line either because the artwork didn't appeal to you, or you thought some other lane battlers out there might appeal to you more, I highly recommend you at least give it a shot, because even people who thought they wouldn't like this, who I've shown it to, have really enjoyed it.
I won't get into like I've talked a lot about like what the reasons why it doesn't land as much for me or hasn't so far, but I will just say my favorite thing about Battle Line is that you can either do 5 flags or 3 extra there, because it's almost that I'm going to take it way back to tic-tac-toe, where you can trap someone where it's like, I've gotten this corner, so now I'm going to if you don't go in the middle, I'm going to win. The fact that you can like have someone where it's like, if they get this one in the middle, that's 3 flags, so I need to block them there, but that doesn't completely derail my plans, because I still have 2 of 5 or whatever. Like, that it always puts the pressure on, and that pressure is like what makes Battle Line, at least in the games I've played, fun, is that you're always feeling like, oh, like I'm on the edge or on the brink. They have 3 now, they have 4 now, whatever.
And there's a bit of a let's say I had 2 of those flags and I had the middle one. I could play a 4 and a 5 of the same color to make you think I might be doing a straight flush, but that might be a bluff. I might not have it, and maybe now you spend a big tactics card trying to outplay me there to divert me and stuff. So lots to love about it. Won't say any more. That is Battle Line.
Nice. All right, my number 2-player game is Seven Wonders Duel. So this game is a 2-player game that I've loved for a long time. It's, again, one of the most played games in my collection. One of the earliest board games I actually bought. I think this is like not going as far back as like Pandemic, which was even before I was like into the hobby. But once I got into the hobby, I think I got this in like 2016, 2017, 2018, somewhere in there, which is early for me, like my fledgling collection. And I've played so much of this because there's something so addicting about like the fact that all these cards in these different like formations, because it plays over 3 ages, and everyone's gonna have this different formation of cards that is in this like pyramid-esque structure, that some are flipped face down and some are flipped face up, so you can see what certain cards are and where they are, but you also don't know where certain cards are and which ones are going to get revealed, and they only get revealed when you take the cards that are covering them. There's something so addictive about that to me every time, because just in board games, revealing stuff that you don't know what it is just a satisfying feeling. Here, when you're trying to craft a strategy and say like, am I going to lean into like the military victory or the science victory, or am I going to go for points or whatever? Sometimes that changes just by what you flipped over, and you're changing your strategy. You're opening things up for your opponent. They're opening things up for you. Yes, there's a strong luck element with that sometimes, or you'll have situations where the game feels like unsatisfying because it gets decided by a certain card flipping up, but you can also prevent that by making sure you're not in a position where a single card flip can lose you the game. So the fact that you have all these different avenues to victory is one of the best things about it, in my opinion, because you never feel like you're really out of the game. Like, you can be falling behind on points like crazy, and you can just say, you know what, I'm just going to start collecting science cards, and your opponent will start to feel the pressure. Like, if you get 3 of the science tokens or 4 science symbols or whatever, suddenly they're like, ooh, maybe I should start taking some science cards because I don't want to lose the game that way. And that slows down what they're doing. Maybe you can get some points back that way. There's this tug of going on in multiple directions, and the fact that there's already a couple expansions, and they're both fantastic, and they both add different things. Like, one adds a completely new win condition as well. So it's just a game that continues to expand. It continues to be one I enjoy playing. I play it tons on VGA. I play the physical version a lot too. Not enough. I should be playing the physical version more. It's one. The only downside I'll say about Seven Wonders Duel, for me, the big one, I shouldn't say only downside. One of the big ones is it's not the 2-player game that I will bring out for people that don't play a lot of board games. We're looking to play a 2-player game. Like, I wish that it was a little bit easier to teach and introduce that way, because I would gravitate to this one more. But I end up going to like Patchwork and even like Mandala and stuff, because they're just easier to teach and sort of like less imposing on the table, like with the worth.
There's a lot going on for your first game of this, especially if you don't play a lot of games. Like, even just always having to calculate what is the cost if I don't have the resource for it and stuff, right?
And with also how much I've played, I just feel like it's hard for me to it's hard for me to feel good about just destroying someone who's never played before. But regardless, it's gonna stay in my collection for a long time. I don't think I'll ever get rid of Seven Wonders Duel, and it'll be one I constantly gravitate towards, especially if people are suggesting it or want to play it.
Nice. I won't add a whole lot. I've talked about this game as well in other videos where you've talked about it, but I just want to make a quick comment that I'm pretty sure your top 2, if I know what your number 1 is, are games that are nowhere near my top 50, and I think I can say the same about my top 2 being nowhere near your.
There you go.
Interesting. We had lots of overlap up to this point, but the top 2 here.
It's good we have different opinions. Otherwise, why would there be 2 of us on the channel?
Yeah,
exactly. Be confused like Dragon Ball Z.
Get out of here. Dragon Ball Z nonsense. Okay, but it would have to take like 80 videos for it to happen, right?
Exactly,
So
of course.
Things move quickly, or don't move quickly in the Dragon Ball universe. So my number 2 2-player game of all time. These 2 I waffled on quite a bit in terms of what to, like, whether to reorder these, because one of them I technically have higher than the other one in my favorite games of all time list. But the order seemed right to swap them. So my number 2 2-player game of all time is Race for the Galaxy. This is my number 2 game of all time in general. Incredible game. Pretty much entirely card-based, 2 to 4 players. I mean, what else? I've talked about this on the channel before. I'm just going to try and keep this a little bit brief in terms of what I love about it and why at 2 players specifically. So this is one that is still like really good at 3 and 4 players. A lot of these other games like Santorini and Innovation I've mentioned I would never play at those counts. Race for the Galaxy was tough to put on this list because it's still amazing with 3 or 4, like incredible game, but it definitely does shine with 2, and the reason for that is because of this simultaneous action selection system, where you're basically, everyone has a hand of these action cards and you're picking a card, and once everyone has picked, you all flip to show what you're going to do for the round, but then we're going through these in sequential order, and that phase triggers for every player, so every player is going to get to take that action, but whoever played that card is going to get a bonus. So you're trying to suss out what the other players at the table are doing. With 4 players, not only are there more different agendas at the table, so more of the actions are probably going to come up, but because there's more different players at the table, like there's potentially 3 opponents rather than just 1, there's more people holding cards, and there's certain cards in the game that, or certain strategies where you're maybe looking for a certain card or a couple cards in the deck, and so when you're doing these search actions, the game, there's a bit more randomness with 3 or 4 players because you're less likely to find the cards that you need, or you're more likely to get phases triggered that you might not have needed to, and you're also keeping track of more players. And because the whole game is building this tableau, building this engine, using these multi-use cards, I just find it really shines with 2 players because every player instead is picking 2 actions, so you're still triggering 4 actions or phases per round, but each player has more control over what's going on. And so, and of the games in here, again, it's not as interactive as a lot of the other games in my top 10, but the way that kind of simultaneous play with no downtime, the sort of searching through the deck for those cards, everything, the way it comes together is just such an incredible game. And what it does in that time frame of, again, if you're playing with an experienced player, physical copy is still going to take at least 10-15 minutes, but like, the fact that you can play a game that quickly with that much sort of decision space, or the digital version in like 3 minutes, is unmatched in board games. So this is a very unique game for me, and one I'm always going to love playing.
Nice. The only thing I'm going to add is we should do a Patreon exclusive video that's just me filming you play a game of Race for the Galaxy, the digital version in 3 minutes.
Yeah, just good call. Yeah, I should do it. I should see how many I can do in 10 minutes or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great call.
Yeah, good.
Race for the Galaxy. Tom Lehman's greatest game. I won't hear anything else.
Just before I show my number 1, we've had some people for some reason comment before saying that they think we're pretending to take sips of our drink, because they're like, you should be done by now. This is my last sip. There's just one more sip.
Why don't you pour some on the table just so that the viewers can't? Oh, come on.
It's empty now. If you see me drink from this now after this, then you know I'm lying. Okay.
But how do they know that wasn't a lie?
It wasn't a lie. My number 1 2-player game of all time is Castles of Burgundy. This slid into number 1 just from this last, I would say 6 months. This is a recent realization. I always preferred it at 2, but it's a recent realization how much I preferred it at 2. I think it's just in general in 2022. And we just had a game of this. It actually was one of my favorite games that I've played at 2 in a while. I lost, but we both had scores over 200, which doesn't happen very often. Or I think I was right at 200 or something. And it was. It's not that it reminded me, but it just like it was a prime example of what I love so much about this game at 2 is in that there's less tiles available to choose from. And you can't bank on, oh, that tile will come up later, I can probably get it, because there's going to be, like at 4, there's so many tiles available that yes, there's more people grabbing, but there's a good chance that like if you're looking for a specific building, you can be like, oh, it's round 2, that'll come up before round 5. At 2, there's times where I see a building in round 2 and I'm like, okay, I need that for this spot, and then I don't see that building again for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And you have to plan for that. You have to have like plan Bs and all that kind of stuff, plan Cs, to like be able to still recover from that. I have drastically different games. You got all the mines in the game that we played, and I got no mines, so I had to find other ways to get silver to be able to buy things and still compete for the extra tiles. There's so many layers to Castles of Burgundy, and I just find it so satisfying to chain things together, to figure out, you know, which way where I'm gonna start my castle, where I'm gonna build to, what I'm going to go after, when I'm gonna decide, you know what, this isn't gonna be my game for animals. I'm just gonna stop trying to force that. I'm just gonna try to like be the first one to complete getting all my ships so I get the bonus token, or I'm gonna go really hard into buildings. Like
even the turn order thing with the ships is something that has really grown on me game after game.
It's funny you say that, because that can be a huge swing where like you jump ahead and essentially get 2 turns in a row, or especially if the board's refreshing going into another round or something.
And even just if you stay in second pick over and over, like it adds up not getting the better choice over and over and over. Like
it is an ugly game, but but you know what? It's an ugly game.
It's quite as ugly as you say it is.
It's sorry.
I mean, I guess
ugly,
that's subjective. I shouldn't tell you what you find ugly.
Yeah,
but
it's drab, but it, you know, it somehow grows on me. I don't even play with the new version on BGA. I always set it to the classic version.
Oh yeah, good,
like,
nice.
At this point,
I didn't even know you could set it to the new version.
You can do either one. But yeah, I love this game. It's great at 3 and 4. I don't know that I would. I haven't played it at 4 in a while. I didn't dislike it at 4. It just takes a lot longer than I want Castle of Burgundy to take. I've loved it at 3. At 3 is pretty close for me, but nothing beats the tightness of a 2-player game of Castle of Burgundy for me. And it's one that, like I said, it grew tons for me in 2022. I'm going to continue to play this game, and I am a little bit upset with myself that I didn't find a way to get the new version, like the new collector's. Like it was super expensive. It's unnecessary, but considering it's one of my favorite games of all time, that would have been nice to have that on my shelf.
The thing is, they're just gonna keep like within another few years there'll be another new updated edition, and like you're gonna have options. You know?
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, awesome game, and one that has grown on me a decent amount over the last year or so. Yeah. So I'm really happy. But it's a great game. All right, my number 1 is the one that was also number 1 the last time we did our 2-player best games that play at 2 players video. That is Carcassonne. This was my gateway game that got me into the hobby about 15 years ago. And this is a game that I still enjoy a decent amount with 3 and with 4 and 5 and stuff. Well, 3 especially. With 4 and 5, I find it drops off a decent amount for me. But with 2 players, there's just nothing like it for me. And this is another one that I struggle to put on these videos or in this type of list, because the last time we did this, I got a couple of people gave me a hard time in the comments about, oh, you run a YouTube channel and Carcassonne's your best 2-player game? Like, what a joke and all this stuff. And like, so I have these doubts over time where I start thinking like, oh, is it just the nostalgia? Am I biased because it was my gateway game and all this? But I've played it a lot over the past year. I've gotten back into it. And honestly, like, I don't care what anyone says about saying like it's too random or it's too simple of a game. Like, I strongly disagree, and if anyone thinks that there's too much randomness to it, then like you're happy to challenge me to like welcome to challenge me to like a best of 7 or something. Like, if it's too random, then the more games we play, it should just be even across the board, right? But if I win a bunch of the games or you win a bunch of the games, I think we can safely conclude that it's not a random. People always say it's a luck fest, and that really bothers me about the game, because it's not. It's only a luck fest if all you're thinking about on your turn is where can I put this to get myself points. If you're never thinking about the way the map is developing, thinking about the long-term consequences of where you're placing your tiles, using your tiles to deny your opponent's opportunities, making those trade-offs where you say, I could get myself 5 points with this round, but if I put it here, I'm going to strand 2 of my opponent's meeples for the rest of the game, and there's 30 tiles left, and they only have 1 meeple in their supply. Maybe that's worth it. There's things that just can't be quantified and that also don't really come up for consideration when you've only played the game like a couple times. But a game that I've played hundreds of times with very experienced opponents, the level of sort of depth from the first couple plays to now is like astronomical. And I think a lot of people see this as like, oh, it's that simple gateway game, played a couple times, then people move on thinking, you know, there's just better games in the hobby. And this is just kind of like the embodiment of like perfect like simplicity in board gaming for me is 2-player Carcassonne. There's nothing like it, and I don't know if there's going to be a 2-player game that'll top it for me. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah, I won't add anything except to just show the camera here that it specifically says on the box, especially good for 2 players. So that commenter.
Oh, nice.
It says it right here.
Oh, man, Dylan, I'm so glad.
It's on the box.
Thank you, because we've had other people say too, no, it's better with more players. But anyways, there's a competitive scene for this game. It's almost all exclusively 2-player games for a reason. But anyways, I could talk about this game forever. That is Carcassonne.
And those are our full lists, top 10 games, top 10 2-player games. Let us know in the comments what your favorite 2-player games are, which ones you think are misses for us, because we maybe haven't played them, so that we can let you know in the comments if we have or haven't played them. Maybe there's some that we hear about or come up a lot in the comments or get like a lot of thumbs up that we go check out that might make our list when we update this, you know, in a year, 2 years from now, whatever.
Speaking of which, I'll say right now, yes, before you get in the comments and say it, we have played Targi. Neither of us like it all that much so far. We've played it once or twice. It was all right, but
I can also say there's tons of games that are probably amazing 2-players that we have not played.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think our misses are so we can go check them out in the comments, and let us know what you think of our list in general. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you want to join our Discord, link in the description. If you want to support us, Patreon link in the description. Otherwise, we will see you next time.
And before you give me a hard time, Patrick was my number 11. It just missed out. I apologize to you and to everyone watching.
Too late. See you next time.